everyone. Last week I baked a pie from scratch using our homemade butter. So this week I'm going to show you how we make that butter with our fresh milk. This is our fresh milk right here from the farm. All of the cream rises to the top and you can see the milk at the bottom. Our cream is a golden color because of the breed of our cow. She is the Guernsey. And so that gives us that nice golden color for our cream. What I do each week is I skim off the cream from the top of the milk and I save it in a quart jar. And then I can go ahead and use that in our blender and make us butter for the week. I typically do about 4 pounds of butter each week. So I'll collect 4 quarts. Each quart is about 1 pound of butter. So I'll go ahead and start by skimming that cream off. There's just a little bit of room left in the jar, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and fill. I like to use a ladle out of a silverware set. You could also use a 1/4 cup, anything that'll fit in the wide mouth of the milk jug. The cream is very thick in comparison to the milk, and so that's what's going to give us our butter. You can see how it's sticking to the ladle. And then when I get to the point where I start to see the milk coming through the cream, I stop, because that will just put more of a skim milk into the butter. And we want just those cream solids to go for our butter. And then this milk, I can cream a little more off of the edges, and then we will use this for fresh drinking. So I'll put this one back, and then we'll be ready for our cream to go into the blender. So then all I have to do is just pour this right in. Add the lid on. Now when making your butter, you would want to use more of a high-powered blender rather than like a food processor. The high-powered blender that you would use for making smoothies or something that would have the capacity to crush ice, that would be better because it's at that higher speed. You also don't want to fill it all the way full, so that way there's airspace so the cream can bounce up and down. And that's how your butter solids come together. So I will go ahead and set this at a 3. All right, and now we are ready to get started. So you can see how it's mixing there. It is going all the way to the top, and that's just the force that the blender is working through the cream, and that's what you would want. So that's why you would not fill it all the way full. At this point, this is where you would have a whipped cream consistency. So the liquid was clear up at the top and it started to settle in the middle here. So that's going to be your whipped cream. There you can see the liquid and you can see some yellow chunks in here. If I open it up, it'll make a difference there. You can see it's starting to separate. And I'm just going to go ahead and blend this for just a few more seconds to really separate that out. Okay, so now I am ready to go ahead and separate out our butter solids from the liquid. And this liquid is what would be buttermilk. So it's the leftover milk that's been separated or pulled out from the butter. And so I am going to separate that out into this jar here and keep that. I'm just pressing on the butter to kind of mash it together so that way it sticks to itself and I have more separation of the buttermilk to the butter. And as I get to the end of this little liquid at the very bottom of the blender, it does work easier to just pour it into the bowl. So I will go ahead and do that. There we go. And then I want to make sure that I still separate all of that out. So I will kind of press our butter together. And I'm done with my blender. And the timer on the blender was 54 seconds. So there you can still see that buttermilk coming out of the butter. And our cream has now separated into the two products. So really when you make butter, you get the butter itself as well as the buttermilk. And we will use this buttermilk throughout the week for pancakes. You could use it for ranch dressing. We use it for lots of baking, muffins, all sorts of things. And then I'm going to keep pressing this to the sides of the bowl just to release more of that buttermilk out of there. I want to extract as much of that out that I can because that's going to make our butter last longer in the refrigerator. Okay, so once the buttermilk has kind of been out of there, then I'm going to rinse the butter. And so that's going to pull out more of that buttermilk. So I'm just using cold water. And you can see as I'm rinsing the butter that that water is now turning cloudy. And that's just pulling out more buttermilk. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the water about 3 or 4 times. So I'm actually going to step to the sink so that way I can completely rinse this, dump this cloudy water out, and then keep adding fresh, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, and I left a little bit of water in there so you can see how clear it is now. We've got all of the buttermilk rinsed out. So I'm just gonna pour that off, and then I'm gonna take the back of my wooden spoon and just kind of press to pull out more water. And now the water does not mix in with the butter because the butter is now a fat. And so just like oil and water do not mix, the butter is not going to mix with the water and the water with the butter. And so it stays separate and it'll float out. Okay, and I am almost finished with our butter. The very last step is to add the salt. So I have a ½ teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt that I'm going to add to our butter. The salt is going to do two different things. It is going to continue to pull out moisture, and so you can see more of that water is coming out. And then of course it also adds flavoring. And the salt will help preserve the butter. Okay, that salt is just all mixed in there now, so I will go ahead and get this ready to go in the freezer. I do like to freeze it. If I'm using it fresh, I would put it right into a jar or a butter dish. But today we're gonna go ahead and freeze it, and I'll show you what that looks like here. I like to use a pie pan. That way I can turn our butter into like a little puck on the pie pan. And then as I'm shaping this, more of that water is going to come out off of the surface. And that's what's nice about the pie pan, is that it will help the water find a place to go while it's in the freezer, rather than a bowl that it's going to sit at the bottom of the butter. Okay, and I'm just continuing to shape. Okay, and now our butter will go right into the freezer. Okay, so this is our finished butter right out of the freezer. It is hard. You can tell the pie pan is frosty. And so what I would do is go ahead and pull this up off of here and then put it in a baggie to save. This disc right here would be about 1 pound of butter. And so then when I go to use it, I just quarter it and then cut out the tablespoons or how many other measurements that I need. And that's what I would bake with. This is what we use all the time. I hope you enjoyed watching me make butter today on Farm from Scratch. We took our fresh milk, turned it into butter with our end result here. We also have buttermilk. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching.